What up, peeps? Welcome back to Musicians Help, and today we're talking about important things you should keep in mind when you want to be a touring musician. Now, there's some things outside of playing that we really don't talk about, or maybe just aren't really thought too much about, that I would like to just throw out there, and let's spark some conversation and, see what we get out of this. So let's get started. So I do want to address the thing, yes, you need to be good and you need to be talented at your instrument, right? And all that this comes down to really just professionalism in your craft specifically. And what I mean by that is you got to be able to learn the music, and you need to understand the vision of the artist or the creative director or your musical director, and not be so willing to put your own influence on music and your playing style and all this other stuff. Now, obviously you got called to do the gig, so they trust that they know what you do, right? So you probably have your own flair and all that kind of stuff that they're excited to bring to the table, which adds to the overall vision. However, not being married to your ideas or your embellishments or things like that, because, sometimes things change. So just keeping that in mind. So I only wanted to quickly talk about the playing stuff, so no one's like, oh, you have to be a good player too. Well, obviously, right? You need to be really good at your instrument. But let's talk about the other things that we don't really consider too much or aren't really discussed. The first thing being is that we really got to dive into this being on time. Now, there's a lot of things you need to be on time for. Let's start at the beginning. Making your flight. You need to be on time for your flight. Most of the time, everybody's coming probably out of rehearsal at one central location somewhere in the world, and they're probably gonna have you guys start someplace, right? You may start in LA, it seems to be like a trend, but oftentimes you may start on the East Coast, so you have to make this flight. They want everyone to move as a unit because it's a lot easier to confine when we need to have transportation to an airport, transportation from an airport to your hotel or to the first venue, and then from that venue going straight to your bus tour or whatever the situation is. It's just easier to move everyone as a unit. If you're late for that kind of thing, like you're really messing up the tour manager, you're messing up a lot of other aspects here, and you can't do that. That's a bad thing. A couple more things when it comes down to being on time. Your sound checks, your call times, and your lobby calls. They're very important. Now, call times is essentially when you made it to your next city and you have your hotel room, and then we have to go from one city to the other, and they're saying, hey, we need to make sure that we're out of here by this time. Sometimes it might be really early, sometimes it might be really late, sometimes it might be reasonable depending on maybe you have an off day, they're not super eager to get out of there, or your off day is in the next city, so like, hey, we're gonna leave here at 3 a.m., get you here, and then your off day is at whatever. It doesn't really matter. You just need to make sure you're on time for those things. Sound checks, being on time for that. Depending on, you might be the opener and the headliner might only give you X amount of time. And full transparency here, when you're the opener, well, you're kind of just at the expense of whatever the headliner wants to do. That doesn't matter, but just be on time, be ready to rock and roll. So all in all, just make sure you're on time for whatever they're asking you to do. That's call times, flights, rehearsals, whatever. Be on time. Something we don't really talk about too much is what we call hygiene. When you're on tour, you're essentially living with someone. And if you've ever lived with someone, which everyone has, from your parents to your siblings, maybe you have a significant other or you have roommates, you know how this can be sometimes. They might be leaving things all over the place. They might be smelly. They might not shower as frequently. They might have bad breath, all this other stuff. And hygiene is important because essentially now you're living with these people, and we gotta make sure we're mindful. We don't be smelly. We don't really leave things out. We wanna cause leaving droppings from when you eat and not clean up after yourself. Things like that are very important when you're on the road for a wide variety of reasons, but I think we can understand that. So keep your hygiene in check, do a little self-evaluation, make sure you're just on top of that stuff. Okay, now I think this should go without having to say, but I've been in some situations where we do need to say it. You gotta be trustworthy. And what that means is that now, because we are living together, throughout the duration of this tour, and it could be a month, 2 months, or we could be on a world tour where it could be lasting almost a half a year to a full year, depending on what you're doing. I'm living with you, and I need to trust that if I leave my laptop out, you're not gonna steal from me. Or if I leave my wallet out, you're not gonna steal from me. If I leave my watch out, you're not gonna steal from me. Also, we're probably gonna visit a city where it's now coming close to your home city, or you might know some people there, totally fine. Sometimes you have rules where you can't bring anyone on a bus, but most of the time it's usually not that big of a deal. If you're gonna bring someone on our bus though, you gotta make sure that they're trustworthy as well. Like, yo, don't touch people's stuff, sit in the common area, right in the front here, and that's just kind of it, because that's essentially like bringing someone into your home. You wanna make sure, especially if you're a roommate, you're bringing someone into your home, that they're not gonna do weird stuff. They're not gonna disrespect your roommate. They're not gonna just leave stuff out. They're not gonna overstep boundaries. yeah, I gotta be a trustworthy person yourself. Another thing when it comes down to being trustworthy, when we are out on the road, we're away from our home here, you're now family and you need to move accordingly. And now all family members are not gonna like each other or be on the best of terms and always get along. That's family. However, when you're out with your real family, you know that like if something goes down, we got each other's backs. And what that means is if we're going someplace together, we need to leave together. It doesn't mean that we always have to do that, but there's a communication and respect, like, yo, I'm gonna stay here a little bit longer, I'm talking to blah, blah, blah. Or you might meet someone and like, I wanna do X, Y, and Z. Cool, not a problem. Just communicate that so everybody is just on the same page because we are family now. If someone is like, yo, I feel uncomfortable, you also need to be willing to be like, yo, all right, cool, we're out. No questions really asked. It's just a loyalty aspect here of just moving as a unit and a cohesive thing, especially when you're away from your home. You need to just have that trustworthy aspect here as moving as a unit. All of that to say, I think we can realize what I'm really saying. You need to be a good person. Oftentimes we think, especially when we're newer to playing music or we're newer to just being a touring musician, oh, being a good enough musician is good enough, or being talented on my instrument is good enough. No, it's not. It's a thing that shouldn't really need to be said. Obviously, you need to be good on that, but being a good person is the most important. And here's what I mean. Let's say you're on a world tour and you're playing for an A-list celebrity, right? And I always like to use iconic names, so this is a real easy translation here. So let's say we're saying Beyonce or like Taylor Swift. Iconic names. So let's say you're on that gig. Your show is probably gonna last an hour to an hour and a half. Great. What are you gonna do for the other 22 and a half hours? You gotta hang out with these people. You gotta be around them. You're probably gonna have lunch with these people. You're gonna have breakfast with people. You have lobby calls with people, all this other stuff. And I have to trust that you're gonna be a good person. You're not gonna be doing drugs, getting us in a weird spot. You're not gonna be drinking. You're not gonna wanna start fights. You're not gonna try to bring girls or guys back to the bus and create conflict here. You gotta be a good person. You gotta be someone we could trust. We gotta be someone we can rely on outside of your instrument. So even if your sound check is an hour and then your show is an hour and a half, okay, that's only 2.5 hours of work per se, of you need to be on your instrument, the thing that you think is the only prerequisite to get in here. No, there's a whole 21.5, 22 hours here left that I still have to hang out with you. We have to just be around each other and all that other stuff. So being a good person is very, very important. Now, I'm gonna make another part 2 to this video because there's a couple of more things I wanna talk about, but I wanna keep this video pretty short and concise just because I don't wanna waste your time. Look, if there's other things that you all have thought about, maybe you've toured or maybe you've done a bunch of spot dates or a string of shows back to back, let's say a week or two or whatever, or you experienced some things, yo, leave it in the comments. Let's talk about this. The whole point of Musicians Help is that we as musicians and artists and entertainers are helping each other out. We're sparking conversations. We're having these types of conversations all to help. This is very, very important. So leave it in the comments. Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe, share this with your friends. We want to grow this channel and just make this community more cohesive for us as musicians. So yeah, you guys have a great, great day.